welcome to PODigal Sons, episode 7. I have my good friend Chad Leblanc with me. Me and Chad kind of grew up together playing baseball. We also have a background that's founded in faith. So he would be the perfect person to be my first guest on the show, really. So I'm happy to have Chad. Chad, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, maybe go a little bit into your background as well. But thanks for being on, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Saw what you were doing and was excited to, come on and help you out or just talk and be a part of it. So I think it's really cool. Yeah, I'm Chad. Grew up with Ronnie. We got a lot of years on the baseball field together and life together. So and then yeah, just been knowing each other for a while. Stayed in constant communication. As you said, we kind of align in our faith and the things we believe in and how we kind of approach life. So yeah, another reason why I was excited to join the conversation and be a part of it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're both sort of cradle Catholics, right? We sort of grew up in that. And so a lot of people kind of go through this as a Catholic, a cradle Catholic, they're raised in the faith, but I feel like a lot of us didn't quite register. So that's where the name Prodigal Sons comes from is, when, there's a lot of people out there that have kind of ventured away from it, and then returned back to it. And it's that same sort of prodigal son journey that a lot of people go through. I'm not saying that that's part of Chad's story, but um, Chad and me, Chad and I, we went through the confirmation retreat together, and he attended the same church that I did growing up as well. So we have a lot of the same stories, both in the way we were raised, as far as our denomination, and also some of our experiences on the baseball field. Um, and did you ever take my mom was part of your teaching your catechism or no?
Yeah, shout out Miss Arlene. Definitely had her in catechism and spent many nights at her house. She's been a huge part of my life as well. Yeah, I can't remember exactly what grade. I want to say it was in the between the second to sixth grade range. But yeah.
Awesome. Yep. Shout out, mom. I'm sure you're watching. Um, but yeah, we went on the confirmation retreat together. I remember we hung out a lot during that, and so it's just kind of full circle, that we're now doing this. Um, but I had a story for you. It's a baseball story, and I'm sure you're aware of one of my more interesting moments in my high school career, was that Denham Springs game, right? And I don't know. So basically, what ended up happening is, it was this big moment for me because I was growing up in baseball. I was a pitcher, and I did pretty well in my earlier years. And then as we got through further along into my high school career, I just lost my pitching ability. At just some point around my junior year, I just couldn't really pitch well. So I tried to make it as a hitter, struggle with that a little bit, playing first base, hitting. Um, but somewhere in the middle of my senior year, finally started clicking, and I was able to start connecting with the ball, um, and actually made it back into the middle lineup. And then Denham Springs was a big game for me. It was a big moment for me too, but uh, it had a lot of interesting parts to my faith. Actually was involved in that game. I remember it was like 5-6 in the bottom of the seventh. It was the last inning, and I could just feel something telling me like I was going to go up. I was going to get in a position where it would come down to me. And I just sat in the back of the dugout and I just started praying. I had this little cross, and I could remember visually like looking at the cross, sitting down, kind of knowing something would happen. And then sure enough, like I start hearing people getting on base. Things really start warming up as far as the tensions, and you could tell like, um we were a team. We were a scrappy team. You know, we didn't have all the best pitching, but we could hit, and so we were making this comeback against this team that was pretty good. And I was just praying, man. I just sitting back there just praying because I knew something would happen. Um, and sure enough, we ended up tying the game, and I get up there with like 2 outs, and it was just really cool moment. Ended up, I think it was Sterling that was on second.
Robbie
And,
Hawk.
yeah. And I hit a ball
I can
right up.
see it. I can see it as you're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it was Robbie Hawk. That's
When
right.
you only beat somebody twice in high school, you remember both times.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But they were a good team, man, and we
Yeah.
weren't a good team. You know, my junior and sophomore year, we were terrible, and so it was a district game. It was a big game, but I could remember just praying that things would work out that game because it was you know, my dad was a coach, and it was just it was a big deal to us. It was like we grew up, and that was something we grew up in. Um, and so I was just praying, man. And it was the one. I've had 3 prayers answered like immediately, and that was one of them. But it did kind of, that story never like really left me, or that moment never really left me. Like I always kind of go back there if I'm ever questioning like the power of prayer. I can just remember sitting there like praying that we would be successful. And then you know, I always like pray for sports success, but I feel like in moments that where it's more than a game, or there's like something more there, you know, God doesn't mind answering those prayers. But yeah, I don't know if you ever knew that part of that, but yeah, I could just visually remember like sitting in the dugout and just praying that it would work out, and it did. And I hit a ball like right up the middle. And we ended up making a playoff game that year, or like a hybrid sort of.
To get to, yeah. We had to play them
Yeah,
again. Yeah.
yeah, we had to play them again. We lost terribly that game.
Yeah. Yeah. Some
But,
things happened and that didn't work out too
yeah.
well. Yeah.
But to even just compete in district, it was really cool.
Yeah.
So it was a fun little story, but it's just something that, you know, that was really my only really cool moment I can remember. I can remember a lot of cool moments for everyone else, but I
Yeah.
remember your home run against Denham Springs, and all of us having success. It was just a really cool time. But that was the one thing where I was like, I actually just knew something would happen and prayed about it, and it did. And
Yeah.
yeah. But
Well, yeah, I didn't know all that was going on with you behind the scenes there, but it tracks and it makes sense. I joke around with my wife all the time, like, you know, I love you, but you weren't the first thing I ever loved, and that was that was
yeah,
baseball. And
yeah,
I think just we spend so much of our youth and playing it, and so naturally, when you're that committed to something, you're doing the same thing. A lot of things in your life are going to coincide with that. Like I think the first time I
mhm,
thought about God was on a baseball field. You know, it just because
yeah,
it's so much a part of your life, and so yeah, it makes sense why a lot of your first and a lot of your big moments would be wrapped up in that sport because you're so tied to it. So
yeah,
yeah, man, I've had moments like that too out there. Like I said, you just care about something, you love something, and it's going to coincide with other things that happen in your life. So it's cool.
yep, yeah. No, and if God really is in your life, you'll and find a way to involve Him in anything you do. Whether that's working, like you're at work, or you're, you know, talking
For
to
sure.
people, and God is going to make His way in there. But yeah, we don't like abuse that. I don't think we like pray for, you know, the Cubs to win the World Series or anything.
Yeah. Well, maybe like a little. Yeah.
Maybe a little.
But
Yeah,
not serious. I don't expect him to take it serious. Yeah, he can put it at
right,
the bottom of his list. He doesn't need to
right.
throw it up top.
Yep. Awesome, man. Well, we're gonna talk about a lot of cool stuff today. Since we're both Catholic, we're gonna talk a little bit about that, and we'll talk about sort of the differences and kind of like where we sit right now as a Christian society, this hybrid society that we sort of live in, and just sort of the differences between the major denominations. One thing I will say is there's a history of war and these like conflicts between mostly Catholics and Protestants. There is a small history of war or fighting between Orthodox and Catholics, very small in comparison to what Catholics and Protestants have gone through. I mean, we're talking about some major wars, the 30 Years' War, the French Wars of Religion, We're talking like millions of people dying in these things. And that sort of still resonates to today. And you just think about how, for me, it's sort of an embarrassing stain on Christianity, and how much more could have been done in those time periods when instead of us fighting and killing each other, could we have been spreading the faith, or doing anything else besides literally killing each other. So I wanted to kind of talk about, how does that look today? And no, we're not really killing each other. We're not out there in the streets going to war with each other necessarily, but there is still a lot of, as you scroll through Instagram or whatever, and you'll see a lot of people that are almost dedicated to this infighting that is happening with Catholics and Protestants, or whoever it is. And it seems to be sort of what a lot of people's focus tends to, they tend to focus in on that instead of what actually Christ calls us to do, right? So that's something I kind of wanted to hit on, but I just wanted to get your kind of thoughts before I get too far into that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't dive too much into the histories, but a personal story is so for our honeymoon, me and my wife went to Ireland, and we've been back since, and talked to some locals there about the lines between Ireland and Northern Ireland. It still exists today, and like you said, although there's not war, there's still tension, and there's still some areas that you don't want to go, and it's all based on like different thoughts about Jesus Christ. Um, so yeah, it's unfortunate, like you said, that throughout society that's been a dividing line when it should be kind of the thing that kills all the lines.
Right, exactly. You put it well. And I have a little parable that I think is interesting. Um, that I feel like this is kind of what would happen is, so let's say, um, so the rapture happened, right? And everybody goes up. Supposedly we're in heaven, and this is outside of time and space, but this is just for fun and just kind of a thought experiment. But so everybody gets up, and this, all happens at the same time. We have this big feast. Yay, everybody's in heaven. And you have all these different groups, right? You have like Catholics and Orthodox, Protestants, maybe a couple Mormons or something made it in. I don't know. But whoever gets saved, whoever that is up there. And Christ comes in and he says, "So I want you guys to figure out how we're going to do service tomorrow." Um, and everybody's like, "What? I thought you were going to answer like who was right, and I thought you were going to kind of do all this for us, and finally and give us the answers we've been looking for as far as who is the right denomination and all that." And he's like, "No, I want y'all to do it." He's like, "I want you guys to figure it out on your own for tomorrow's service and figure out how we're going to do it." So everybody's sort of scrambling because they're like, "Well, who do we follow more? Are we going to do more of a Catholic mass, or what are we going to take out?" And da, 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 da. So everybody's, but they're in there in front of Christ, right? So they have to figure this out. They don't really have a choice. So they start working on it. They start working on their differences. They start making a couple of adjustments, and they can't really quite figure it out. So they're like, "Hey, we need another day." Supposedly time doesn't exist, but let's say Christ starts the clock and he says, "I want to see how long you guys take to figure this out." So he starts the clock, and they're like, "Hey, we can't figure this out. Can we have a day longer or whatever?" And so he's like, "Sure." Eventually they get through it. They all the people in heaven, they elected whoever from the Protestants, some Catholics and Orthodox, and they all get together, and they start working on it. They start figuring out how to come together, how to work together, what are the best things of each denomination. And so they start getting closer, and after a couple days they finally get it. and they're like, we know how we want to do it. We're going to do it this way, and we're all going to be in unison together. And so Christ goes, great. Why didn't y'all do that on earth?
Yeah.
And it's just interesting that if we were in front of Christ, I think we would be able to figure it out. But it's when we get so wrapped up into worldly things and being outside of the presence of Christ, we tend to focus more on what the world wants us to do, and that's divide and sort of do what's in our best interest. Um, and have we don't really have a sense of togetherness like we probably should in this, especially in this time of where what we live in our society that faces a lot of issues, like abortion and all these things that are terrible for our society, but we don't really hone in on how to fix it because some of us are really um, focused more on who is the right religion or whatever, or the right denomination, I should say. I like to think of it as a sort of analogy would be, you know, the the army and the navy are working together to try to storm um, Germany, but they can't figure it out because they're so busy fighting with each other, that they're letting the Germans win. And that's sort of how I see our society sometimes, is that we're so focused on, Protestants versus Catholics, that our head gets taken off of the ball, our eyes are not on the ball, and that ultimately is what's best for Christianity or what's best for the world. So there are some like key differences, between Orthodoxy and Catholicism, but none that I see that couldn't be worked out. And so, they were all the same church really for 1,000 years. So it's just interesting. Now, there's a lot more work I think you'd have to do between Catholicism and Protestantism, but there's still like the same function as far as how we live our life following Christ. There's really not too many differences in the actual way that we live our life. I think the main differences is just what you do in church, right? The mass is much different than like a Protestant service. But for the most part, our ideals and just following the word of Christ are going to have a lot of the same ideologies. So, do you have any thoughts on that before we move into the next thing?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, too much about the major differences between them, but I do know that they align in Christ, and I don't know how you can kind of reconcile that belief in making some of those differences, like you said, irreparable, or yeah, that would be the only comment I would have towards it. Not that I've spent a whole lot of time. Like, I am a confirmed Catholic. I attend the Catholic Mass. I've gone to Methodist churches. I've gone to I've visited Buddhist temples. I've been
Mhm.
to many places of service and got different things from them, whether I necessarily believed with their doctrine or not. So yeah, especially amongst believers in Christ, I'm with you. I can't see anything that can drive major differences between us focusing on the one goal, and that's Christ.
Yep. And that's always what is the key center of our lives, and what really should be, is just following his example. And there's neither, and that's what Galatians 3:28. You're no longer a Gentile or a Greek or a whatever it is, right? A Jew or
Yeah.
a male or a female. Like, we're all together in Christ. And now it's like we sort of went back to those divisions, and we sort of live in these compartmentalized divisional type worlds. Um,
Yeah, well, that's like the heavy debate with Paul, right? It's like a debate whether he's, at least it's the debate we saw in college, is what was he the first Christian technically? You know
mhm.
what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
probably not, but like, he was the dividing line between, along with Christ, of like how you're going to view the world, and that extension from God's chosen people to, like you said, the Gentiles, without any definition of who the Gentiles is. That's just anybody who welcomes Christ in their heart can join this covenant with his people. So
Yes.
yeah, I'm with you. I don't know how that got twisted into, Gentiles got twisted into all these different sects and infighting, but
Yeah, it's like we all came together and then we all like kind of split it back again.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I'm for the record, I'm not stating Paul was a Christian. I'm just talking about a debate that
yeah, yeah,
about
yeah.
the extension of the covenant from God's people to the Gentiles. That was kind of began with Paul. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Yep. No, it's a good point. But yeah, I think it's just an interesting part of our society. It's not everyone, we're not all like worried about it. But I think if you really looked like online at a lot of content creators, and I mean you could kind of see where people's hearts are and like reading the comments and things and or whatever. And it's just people let it consume them and they don't really think it's happening, but it's so far ingrained into like, well, my denomination is better than yours for this reason or that or the other, or we're the true denomination. And I mean, we all get up to heaven and we're all back on the same playing field. And we're not going to have all these denominations. So I think it's, if you think like what Christ said, live for the kingdom or live for the next life, like we're living now for the next life. And if you kind of are living in that, then you're not necessarily so much worried about, what denomination you are. Now, if somebody's like following a different religion, like whatever it is, then you can have a conversation with them and try to bring them to Christ because they don't have Christ in their life. But if you already have Christ, and there are some like fringe, like Protestant sects and stuff, and some like things where, like I was saying, like Mormonism or whatever, that you kind of you I do feel like you kind of want to have that conversation of like, what do you believe? Why do you believe it?
Yeah,
Let's try to figure this out. But like if I'm talking to a Protestant who's a Trinitarian and he's informed and he's living in the Word of God, then I'm not going to spend my days in this fight with him about Catholicism or whatever it is, and I don't see the need to do that. Um, But yeah, so I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. I think we've talked about it enough. So you wanted to talk a little bit about like convictions and parenting and faith. I guess we'll start with parenting and faith and why that's so important in regards to family life. Christ sort of gives us this structure that we live by. Um, we don't live in these like polygamous situations like kind of controlled the world for a while, and now it's really almost the not even thought of as a Christian concept to be monogamous, but it sort of is. It's almost where really like from the worldwide view of it, monogamy is really almost like solely a Christian invention almost. So I mean, there's probably examples of monogamy in other ways, but as far as it being ingrained into our society, I think we as a society have to thank Christ for that. And ultimately, it's because of God's design for marriage. But I did want to talk a little bit about like parenting and faith and what that's like. Um, and sort of, we grew up in a time in what we used to be, looked at as anytime there was a separation of a family, that used to be a big deal, especially like with divorce. And now we live in a world where, I mean, divorce is sort of a common thing, right? So I see it as, I don't think it's necessarily because we're becoming less Christian. I just think the world has sort of entered into a lot of people's hearts, and they sort of just do what's best for them, and not really what's best for the family. So I want to talk a little bit about that and maybe get your thoughts on sort of where the world is and how you view the family structure and what Christ sort of does for us.
yeah. A couple thoughts on just what I think leads to divorce. I mean, hundreds of different examples, but I think some major things. First, beginning before you even get married, I think a lot of people don't take the consideration or the time to evaluate their partner in the sense of, can I go forever with this person? And then ask them that same question, like, can you go forever with me? And that takes an evaluation on both your parts, on looking at that person and thinking of all these scenarios that could arise in your relationship. And so before you even get married, I think there's some steps you can take, and I don't think a lot of people concern themselves with that. They're more caught up in the fun of marriage and the pictures and the event of it, and or get caught up in the timeline of like, I'm this old, I'm supposed to be married. So they kind of rush into these things. So I think selection of partner is a huge thing that, not enough people put effort into beforehand. And mainly focusing on your core values. I think people get caught up too much, and we have all the same hobbies. Like, for instance, me and my wife, there's a lot of things we don't like to do. Like
Yeah.
on her side and my side, like we don't love all of our interests, but what we do agree on is our core values, our belief system, how we wanted to raise kids if we ever had them. Those sorts of things. And I think that's what people need to focus on more before they get married. And I think a lot of people don't. And then as far as once you're married, I think it's acknowledging that nothing is a fairy tale, and you're gonna run into walls and you're gonna run into hurdles, and it's focusing on the love and the reason you got married in the first place to overcome those. And I think a lot of people give up without necessarily trying. And I'm not saying there can't be some things that are. I've been lucky, you know what I mean, with my relationship. I don't think we've ever had this breaker of, like, whether it's somebody cheating or, you know what I mean, this huge break that could cause the family to disrupt. So in that sense, I've been lucky. But I think people far too often run away from problems instead of maybe evaluating, going to their church, going to God, evaluating themselves and what they can fix internally, to kind of direct these problems in their own marriage. So yeah, I just think some choices some poor choices lead to a lot of divorce more than circumstances that are inconceivable or that you can't overcome.
Yeah, and I think people sort of go into it like with that option there. Like they're like, we could, if
Oh yeah,
things don't work out, I could just get divorced, and that's kind of like the mindset
yeah,
that a lot of people go into it. And then, like you were saying, I mean, if you don't have any core beliefs, then how can you like? And that's what I think some people like. They think they have some kind of grounding, but if you're doing a secular marriage, there really is nothing that's sort of tying it all together, right? Like with
right.
Christ the head of the household. You're sort of just doing whatever you want, and it's hard to really define like what are your core beliefs, or and it could be so changing between people that it just makes a lot of sense as far as why marriage really is more appropriate in a religious sense than it would be like in a secular one. But
Well, and then
again,
you could, I think a secular person too could say, well, we exchange vows. I'm like, yeah, but what are the core of those vows? And if you don't believe in the core of that, then ultimately you don't believe in those vows, which,
yeah,
like you said, gives an easy out of, I can
right,
get out of this, like, because you don't,
yeah,
you're not drawing where these vows come from. Because I, like you, am, whether people treat it differently now, like, I do believe that marriage, the foundation, the family foundation, comes from religion in the Bible. And if you're not drawing there for it, then yeah, you're going to run into all these exit doors along the way.
yeah. Yeah, you can just justify anything to yourself because
Yeah,
your core beliefs are what you make up. So you're easily able to justify divorce instead of having like something holding you accountable, right?
yeah,
Which ultimately is the church and is Christ, really. Whether you're looking at the scripture by itself or not. So I have a good scripture that I was going to read. It's not very long, but it's Matthew 19, and it's a very important one for many reasons. I'll go ahead and just read it. But so some Pharisees came to him to test him. They asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Haven't you read," he replied, "that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two flesh, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." Why then, they asked, did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away? Jesus replied, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard, but it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another woman, commits adultery. And it's just a very important verse for a number of reasons, but it just sets a different standard than what the Israelites were living in. It's just they were so consumed with the law and sort of taking advantage of the law, like when they felt appropriate. That for them, as long as Moses told them it was okay, then it's like, yeah, it's fine. But they don't really register like the evil that it's doing to this person, right? You're sort of abandoning them, or whatever, whatever bad outcome could come from it. And I mean, there's a lot of bad outcomes that come from, abandonment, or single single motherhood, or whatever is the case. And we have a lot of compassion for those people living in that situation. But at the same time, if we ourselves are creating those situations, it's not it's not good, and it is ultimately an evil. But it's a different belief system than most people would have, or most that you would see like in other religions. Number one, I mean, a lot of other religions, even in like these other things, like whether it's Islam or Mormonism, they don't have monogamy like you would in most Christian churches. So this verse itself sort of changed everyone's perception on how we approach family, the seriousness behind divorce, like why these churches don't just let people just divorce for no reason, because it's creating so many problems. And the moment that you sort of take away, once you sort of bypass what Christ holds us accountable for, and then once you start kind of doing your own thing, I mean, it just sort of opens the floodgates, right? And then you have all these bad situations, where whole families are getting abandoned, or whatever, whatever other thing. Um, it's also important because this really, like, you're looking at the law that was written by Moses, and Christ he didn't abolish the law, but at the same time he approaches it in a different way, and truly fulfills it, and says, it's not look into your heart, and what are you really doing right now? The only reason Moses even had to write you this is because you were constantly doing this to yourselves, and trying to separate from these women, or whatever. So it sort of it made a lot of the early Christians, and up until this time, uh, realize that Christ had, and God, or Christ with God, had a different plan for us in his design for marriage. And it's why we hold ourselves to a different standard, even to the point of like not looking at women with lust is also adultery. But any type of marriage outside of the original marriage that God deemed as a union would be adultery. So it is just a very interesting verse. Sort of redefines everything that we think we know about the Old Testament law, family structure, how we're supposed to treat family. But do you have any other thoughts on that verse, or anything else before we move on?
Yeah, just to piggyback off you a little bit. So right after where you wrapped it up, Jesus replies, "Not everyone can accept this word, but only those to whom it has been given." And then he speaks of eunuchs and the exception there, and then the people who choose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. But then he ends that 11 with, "The one who can accept this should accept it." And I think uh, accepting it is the whole deal, right? It's like you have to accept the rule of it, and the commitment of it, and how serious it is. And that's the only way you can be effective in it, is to accept the what you're being called to do in marriage. Which goes back to, it doesn't matter what vows you took if you don't believe in the core of those vows, and who you have to answer to for those vows.
Yeah.
um
Yeah, and then just like you were saying too, like then your approach to marriage and before you get married, right, and how you select that person is much different when you after reading the gospel and understanding it, and understanding that what you're doing is permanent, and you can't go back on that, right?
Yeah, and
So
he says the one who can accept should accept, not must. So you're not being driven to do this and to enter this matrimony. You know what I mean? It's a choice, and if you're going to choose it, you should take it very seriously.
right, exactly. And if you, yeah, because if you don't take it seriously, somebody's going to get hurt along the way. Whether it's yourself or your spouse or your children, there's going to be some evil that is going to happen because of your inability to accept it or your inability to like take this seriously. So I think the Israelites at the time were just so worried about how the law had helped them in their own like selfishness. And Christ is like, no, like what
Yeah,
really needs to happen is you need to look inward into your heart and realize what are you getting yourself into, because you're not just gonna write this bill of divorce and just go live your life like nothing happened. Like that's not really the point of what the law was.
right.
Um, so that kind of moves us into. Did you have any other thoughts on that?
No, that's good.
Okay. So that kind of moves us into like parenting and faith, which is, we sort of set up in that sacrament, and then moving into now we have children, right? And what does that look like in today's world? And I know this is something you'll have some thoughts on, but I see a lot of, I have girls, and you have a girl, right? So it's interesting, like the way that society has changed so much just over the years. Both good and bad ways, but we look at like a lot of us, we prioritize, or what society sort of prioritizes is wealth and career over family, which I think that's a major one, especially with young women. They sort of go into college, and sort of family is like the second, like it's like they're almost like a plan B in some cases. Not everyone. I'm not speaking for everyone, but it's sort of driven and it's put out there that your career and your wealth is gonna be what makes you, which I think that can do some damage. Because it's not really God's design. And I mean, if you're not a Christian, then it wouldn't really matter. That first you have to have Christ to get to there. But if you are a Christian and you're sort of living in that, you're sort of prioritizing worldly possessions and all these things, and that's sort of the opposite of what Christ really what his message was. There's also issues with like hookup culture that we see prevalent. There's a lot of like plastic surgery trends and influencer culture. People sort of just doing whatever they can, throwing any like morality they have out of the window to just sort of, um, you know, to make money online or whatever. And then there's just this like living your truth. You do you only live once.
Yeah,
All these sort of ideologies that have sort of made their way into our society. So
it's
those are
our
all,
belief system. So it's interesting to hear people who
yeah,
don't believe to say that they don't, they're not tied to something. It's like, no, you have a belief system as well.
yeah,
It's just,
yeah. Everybody has one. I mean, if you don't have one, then
yeah,
that's not a flex.
yeah, true lawlessness. But yeah, but
Yeah,
outside of that, anybody who ties themselves to something has something. I find that as an interesting argument against Christianity or faith in general. Is oh, you're tied to this thing. It's like, well, so are you. You just don't realize that you're tied to the earth and to the people around you and their laws and their what they say is important. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Just like you think I'm tied to this. So
Right. Yeah. Everybody has a religion or a belief system or something they believe in. But yeah, I think, parenting today is much different than like what it probably looked like even in the 90s. There's just so much out there. The world just constantly trying to get into, especially with like phones and things. It's trying to seep its way into our lives, and and with the word of God, you're able to use that as like a shield, to sort of, be able to combat that. But do you have any other thoughts on like parenting today and like moving forward and with raising your children?
yeah, one I think it's kind of a ridiculous notion that you can't. pursue career to a degree and have a good family.
Right.
And I don't have an issue with people who want to do both. It does bother me when people act like one is a hindrance to the other. Whereas like I cannot pursue a career and maintain a family, and it's like yes you can.
Yeah.
I
That
don't like obviously there's some limits to that, and in order to not neglect your children and to be present and I think that that's important in their lives. Like I've had this conversation with a few guy friends who work hard and want to provide for their families, and um, like how much time are you willing to sacrifice away from them, and then all this money that you hypothetically pile up for your family, if your kid grows up and doesn't remember ever being with you, then what was that worth?
right.
And how much
Yeah.
is and ultimately like what they'll remember when they grow up. And I don't think it's going to be like that my dad worked really hard at the office till 2 a.m. every day. I don't think that
Yeah.
that's beneficial to you or your family.
Yeah. I would see like, and I go back to the, God taking care of the birds, right? And them having they're dressed in splendor. And like, what does that mean for us? Like, he's gonna take care of us. And I see a family of however many that are struggling, but they have each other. They might be struggling financially, but if they have each other and they're together and they're living in the word, and I mean they're going to be okay. And just like you said, I feel like that family is wealthier than the family that never sees each other or really isn't a family because they're so wrapped up in the wealth part of it, or what is the next way to keep up with the Joneses or whatever. Like, I need the next big truck or house or
yeah.
whatever thing. And it seems to be something that can take you away from God a lot easier than people would think. Is um is getting like overly consumed with that. And yeah, I agree with you
Yeah.
that,
Chasing material.
yeah, chasing material. And it's all through the scriptures of what Christ like says not to do. He's got the guy there who's like, I do everything right, I follow all the commandments, like
Yeah.
what else is there for me to do? And he's like, okay, just sell all of what you need and come follow me. And this is like Christ in front of him, right?
Yeah.
Like the physical Christ in front of him, and he just couldn't do it. He's like it just something there, just like he couldn't get there. He couldn't walk away from his possessions. And I think people, they cling on to that.
And
um
I think that's a problem across our country and the world, obviously. But I do think one of the benefits of, I mean, and you can speak to this too, of growing up in Southern Louisiana and seeing what real poverty is and seeing families that are in that and they're way happier than you are and way happier than that family that that
yeah,
lives down the road that has the mansion and has the 6 cars. Like
yeah,
there's something to that, and we got to see a lot more of that because of where we grew up.
right,
Which whereas if you grow up in a certain area where everybody has this incredible standard of materials that you're constantly competing against, I don't think you ever get to see that. So that's one of the things I'm grateful for, is where I grew up and the levels of you know everything that I've gotten to see and the different people that live in this state and of all types of wealth. And yeah, I think you get a good sense of like, hey, these people without much or without a lot of materials are doing well and they're happy and their children feel loved and they're always around and positive and so I think it's a benefit to growing up where we grew up.
yep. No, that's a yeah, there is a benefit to that for sure. And it is something that, you know it was I look at that as like a great experience of having grown up there, because I got to see the world in a different way. But yeah, I mean, we all have a choice. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing both. And I love that you said that too, because that's not a problem to do both. Like, you can do your family and you can do your career. And if you're just gonna like, if you're only gonna do a career, I mean, there is probably a path for people, like, to do that. But I still think at the same time is like, what is the motivating thing? Are you trying to go and be like a doctor and save lives, or is this really all just about money?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I think is a good question for people to ask themselves. Like, what is the motivating factor there? Is it just money? Because that's unbiblical for sure.
Yeah.
If your only motivation is what you're living for is to, for financial success or whatever, then that's just never going to be a biblical thing. But anyways, I
And then
like,
to jump into parenting with that too, it's if you're constantly worried about that, like whether I leave my daughter with $100,000 when I die, or I leave her with $100 million, I think she's going to be more concerned with what did my dad do to help
mhm,
me live in this
yeah,
world, and like that's what she's going to recall. You know what I mean? It's not.
yeah,
I don't think all the money in the world I could leave her would make her forget me, like neglecting her throughout her
right,
youth. Like I
yeah,
just, and then especially, and we can get into that too, of specifically having daughters, and what that's like.
yeah, yeah, for sure. No, but you hit on a lot of good things there, man. There's like nothing that all the money in the world can't fix certain traumas or certain problems that you could have, and money is just, I mean, it provides like certain things that you need, but at the end of the day, I mean, your health is what's important, right? And God is going to be able to take care of you if you really truly have faith in Him. And I mean, there's a lot that money can do for you, and it's great. And if it comes naturally to people, then I don't see, it's not like you can't be rich and have a family and be
Yeah.
a Christian. Nobody's saying that. But it's more just about like, where's your heart, right? Like, what are you thinking about continually every day? Like, what are the actions that you're doing? Are they are you like messing people over to do this? Like, what is it? What are you really accomplishing? And you just have to kind of look inwardly. If it's are you working every single day? And that's kind of why that commandment's in there. It's like, dude, chill and take a day off and be with your family. I
And I
mean,
think that's also, I think, a
yeah,
huge focus for us, or what should be a huge focus, is to not, like you said, I don't demonize wealth. I don't envy. It's not beneficial for us to envy those with more than us, right? So it's I don't and some of the wealthiest people on earth create the most jobs and donate the most money. So I don't think to say, once you've reached a certain level of wealth, that's where immorality comes in, where I feel like society is kind of putting that label on people who make a certain level of, achieve a certain level of wealth. We attribute that to evil, and I don't think that that's right either. I think that there are some evil people who have a lot of money and have a lot of things, and I think there are some very good people who have a lot of money and have a lot of good things. So,
right.
like you said, it comes down to your motivation and what you're living for. I don't think whether you earn X amount of dollars or not, I don't think that determines evil or good.
Yeah,
Which, like I said, and unfortunately, politically and in society, I think some people do draw that line of, if you have much, then you must be evil, and I don't think that
yeah.
that's true either.
Yeah, and it goes the other way too, where people like demonize being poor or whatever, and they're like,
Yeah.
if you're poor, then you must not know what you're doing or be less of a
Yeah,
person,
trade
whatever.
jobs, dude. I talk about this all the time with people. Like we've made people feel silly for taking trade jobs that will pay them over 100 grand a year, and we make people feel like
Yeah,
they're failures for taking those jobs. Like, instead of
right.
getting 7 degrees and go sit in an office and making 20 grand a year because you
Yeah,
can be on Instagram all day. Like,
Christ had a
it's
trade job, bro. He was a carpenter,
yeah.
man. Like, people forget that Paul
We
was
could
a
do a
trade.
whole nother episode about trade jobs.
Dude.
I could go deep on that.
What that would be down for that, man. We could have a lot to talk about. But yeah, no, like all the Christ being a carpenter, that's a great example of just you don't have to go figure out how to make $1 million a year. Like, that's not really the point of it. And if you do, then great, but that's that's not necessarily living in God's in the way that God has commanded us to live.
Right.
It's just, what are you prioritizing? Like, where's your mental at? And that's what you kind of let the world. And I mean, that's where I was living in for a long time. It's like I just was so worried about how much money I was going to make, or whatever other thing, that the last thing on my mind at the end of the day would be, did I help somebody, or did I read scripture, or did I live out scripture, or what, that I did wouldn't even, it was part, like, days that I would go that I didn't
Yeah.
even think about it. And that's easy to let happen, is just let work and all these things like consume your life. But I mean, I get it. Everybody, man, everybody's just trying to do their best to provide for their family, and we all need health care and all these things, and
Yeah, for
you
sure.
can't
I
like
just like you
only
said, there's a line though that we can all get to, and where you have to be like, okay, are my kids fed? Am I emotionally there for my spouse? And is my all my bills are paid for? My dog's good. All these things are good. Like maybe it's enough.
yeah.
I don't need to burn all these bridges to go chase a few more dollars. Yeah, like you said, we all have responsibilities. We all have things to do, and yeah, so you got to bite that bullet. But yeah, just finding a contempt area um, of your life where you're not, chasing what you don't need.
Yep. Nah, that's perfect. So I'm gonna move. Oh, there's one thing too that I think I sent you. We have daughters, right? So I sent you what Bill Burr had said. I forgot. Didn't I send you that?
You may have
Where,
go into it.
where, where somebody said to Bill Burr like,
Oh
I
yeah,
forget
yeah, I know it.
it.
Yeah. Like, well, yeah,
But
wait till he's like talking about how good she is and how much he loves her, and they're like, wait till she grows up, and he's like, yeah, everybody who like failed as a dad tells me that. Like,
yeah, everybody
like
is
everybody who's
failed
not
as
a good dad tells me that. Yeah.
yeah. People let the world influence me. They're like, yeah, your child's gonna eventually hate you,
Yeah.
or whatever. And I'm sure that's, I mean, I mean, there are people that, and I'm not like putting anybody that has a teenager or something and they're going through it. Like we all get it, but
Yeah.
I think to tell somebody like that's going to be your reality.
Right.
I just don't let that, I'm like, that doesn't have to be my reality. And
Right.
it is all in how we eventually, like what the principles and what we instill into our children, and there doesn't have to be hate there. There can be moments of disagreement or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny that Bill Burr like put that down so fast, and
Yeah.
I felt that energy because I do the same thing. Even like, people are like, oh, your daughters are gonna fight with each other, just wait. And I'm like, why? Why do they
Don't put
have
that on.
to?
Yeah. Don't put that on me.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
Why do they
keep.
have to grow up like hating each other and fighting with each other? Like
Right.
that doesn't have to be their life.
Yeah.
So yeah, the world can sort of just be in your ear, like, and that's what's interesting about like reading the scripture and living it. It's like there's nothing that's going to be able to come in here that undoes what I instill in my children. And it doesn't matter what you say.
Yeah,
Um,
100%. And there's
but
gonna be those like, I mean, dude, I mean, we all grew up in like, whether you're male, female, the hormones through your teens
yeah,
are crazy. Like I think back to all the time about ways I felt when I was X old, and like how
yeah,
crazy it was for me to think that,
right,
and I kind of come to terms with that now of like how I'm gonna explain to my daughter when she's feeling those things that like I promise you won't feel this in like 3 years.
yeah,
If you grow up a little bit, like you won't think that this is important at all. So those things are going to happen, just like with the chemical things that are going on inside of you. But yeah, as far as all the external things, and like there are things within your control as a parent, and I don't buy into that either. Of like you're going to go down the same road that this other person went down because they
yeah,
say it's a fact of life. It's
right,
there's you have your own influence and you have your own relationship with your kids. And I mean, I saw it with my wife. My wife has a great relationship with her parents, and like has through our entire marriage and relationship. So
yeah,
um, I don't think that that's impossible at all. It's just
right,
you got to make it work.
yep,
And that
yep,
goes back to what I was saying earlier about work and not neglecting your kid for work, and because that's ultimately
yeah,
what's you're going to be rewarded with that relationship later in life because of what you did when they were kids and when they were teens, and and growing up. Like that's how you get to be best friends with your kid when they're old. Is
yeah,
is paying
yeah.
attention when they're young.
No, that's so true, man. Everything eventually comes back around. And yeah, if you prioritize other things when they're young, and then now you have a teenager that's a problem, it's like, man, I mean, that's,
Yeah.
it's not weird, or it's kind of makes sense how you got there.
Yeah, you
But it
can't command that relationship randomly later in their life. Like it has to be something you're working with them every day throughout their youth. Like me and my wife have a lot of conversations with our daughter, and she's about to be 4. But we have a lot of conversations with her as if she was a little older than she is.
yeah,
Just preparing her for these situations and kind of establishing that trust and those relationships. And those are things you have to instill early. Otherwise, yeah, you're not going to be able to play catch up when they're 14. If they have no respect for you when they're 14, they're not going to suddenly gain that respect. You know, it
Yes.
has to be something you have always year in and day out work with them with and tried to make it happen. Yeah, I see that too in people where they, they neglect all those early years, and I'm like, man, this is gonna catch up to you. Like you not paying attention right now, and you not focusing on them right now. You can't demand that later. Like you have to. It has to be consistent throughout their life, and they're smarter than than we think they are. They're paying attention. They know what you're doing. Like I think one of the most important things I can do as a dad to raise a good daughter is to treat her mother well and to treat her well, and she's going to see that. Like it's not so much of listen to what I say; it's no, they're watching what you do, and
Yeah.
you have to lead and be a good example. Like I'm hoping that she grows up and knows how well I treated her mother, and then therefore seeks a man who treats her like that.
Right.
That's ultimately where I think that comes from is how your father treated your mother.
Yeah, you can't just like wake up like 10 years later and try to fix it then.
Yeah.
That's it's gonna yeah, there's a whole foundation that you have to sort of build everything on. And in a secular life, like that's gonna be way harder to do. But like you were like saying, like fact of life, like there really is only one fact of life, and living in that, like instilling all these things that Christ brings us, like serving others, like not prioritizing yourself, all these things that even you can just see it in like how your kids interact with other kids, like they share or whatever. Like
Yeah.
there's just a lot of good things that are going to come from that. And it's a hard thing, like for I think for a secularist to be like, well, why do I have to share? Like this is all about me and my life, and so there's nothing really kind of bringing you out of that.
I think
um
they can believe in a lot of those things, but they can't track it to anything, which means
yeah.
it's like we were talking about earlier with the vows you take when you get married. Like if you can't track it to something, then what
Yeah.
ultimately is it? It's
Right. And if I don't live in that, then what? Or if I change, I can just change what I believe in because there's nothing holding me accountable.
right.
And there's nothing,
Morality is subjective. I can change at any point.
yeah, I
Yeah.
can just change it at any point and then I can make it about myself. Whereas like having an objective source like that is telling you like this is how you live and you don't ever change. And it can just be a big difference in how your kids are or how you raise your kids, but also just how your kids live their life in school and how they treat others and what they do on a day to day,
Yeah.
and how they deal with the temptations of the world. And I just see like how it could be so much more difficult without God trying to do those things. It would be very hard.
But I do think ultimately those lessons that we want to instill, they have to come from us as fathers living our lives Christ-like and not just
Mhm.
telling them that they should. Because I
Yeah.
think ultimately that's where their behavior is going to come from is mimicking yours, not necessarily listening to what you say.
Yes. Yep.
So that's
Mhm.
why it's important for us as dads and as mothers and parents in general to live like Christ. Because if that's how they're truly going to learn to be in the world is to watch you go through it.
Yep. Yeah. Living it and setting the example is a lot different than just saying it.
Telling them to go read the
Um,
Bible in their room like
yeah.
this. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I loved about you. Do you watch The Chosen?
I've seen a little pieces, but not the whole thing. Not much.
I really I enjoy it. And there's a scene where the Romans are making them carry their gear for their mile, and it's like this old ancient law that was in the Roman Empire that they could conscript whoever they needed to carry their stuff. Well, in the when he was doing the Sermon on the Mount and he was talking about like if you're forced to go 1 mile, go 2 miles. And they're all getting like it's just really fun to actually watch this happen and actually see it like played out. But the Romans are like messing with them and putting all these like things on them and making them carry all this stuff. And they go the 1 mile, which that was the legal limit. Like they could only go 1 mile. They can't go anymore. And Christ, he keeps going. And everybody's like, what are you doing? And it's setting an example that if you're basically like if you're forced to do something, or if somebody is even if they just need help, like don't just help them with what you're asked to do. Like, go beyond that. Like, add, like, do you
Yeah.
need this? Like, do you need that? And it's funny watching all these, like, the disciples, and they were like, oh, I remember he said this in his sermon. He said, if you're forced to go 1 mile, go two. And the difference is, like, he actually meant it. Like, he
Lived it.
didn't
Yeah.
just say it, like, he lived that out. And it's the same thing with our children or whatever, is like, you can't just tell them to share or whatever it might be.
Right.
Like, you have to actually show and do that yourself.
Yeah.
And then you get that from living in scripture and living in that, in the word, and abiding by and doing all the sacraments and everything, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, man, that's awesome. Do you have anything else on parenting before we move on?
No, good.
Okay,
I mean, yeah,
cool.
there's a million things that drive me crazy every day. But we can, yeah, yeah. As far as
Yeah.
the main points and what we wanted to talk about, yeah, I think we addressed it all.
Okay, cool. Well, I know you want to talk about convictions a little bit. And for me, like, there's certain things, like, I'll see, and I'm bad about this, and it's kind of the reason I started this podcast, is because I was just arguing with people online, and it's like there's a certain part of me that just likes engaging with people. I don't know. I like the back and forth, and I don't mind it so much. And it's part
Yeah.
of the reason I started this podcast, was I wanted to talk to other people. I wanted to talk to other religions, um, and find out what they believe, different belief systems and stuff. So, but I feel convicted in a lot of ways, like, with what I see out there. Probably one of the big, or, like, the most obvious example of, like, a conviction for me. Have you ever heard of this, like, pro-choice Catholic movement?
I mean, I've seen people who not necessarily tied to Catholicism, but I've seen
Yeah.
Christians argue being
Yeah.
pro-choice. Yeah.
It can be argued in there, but I mean, no, it's, like, literally a thing. Like, this is like the website. It's like Catholics for Choice.
Yeah.
And then I started doing some digging, and there's actually, like, 60 something percent of Catholics are, um, now only 30% of the mass attending Catholics are supposedly pro-choice, which is still a lot for me.
Yeah.
You regularly attend mass and somehow you're pro-choice. I don't know how that's possible.
Yeah.
But to, like to have, like, you fully living, or supposedly living in the grace of God and everything, but still being, like, pro-choice, it's like I feel convicted to correct that, or to have, like, a conversation there. And again, I'm not, like, attacking a denomination, but I'm more or less wanting to understand, like, where are you getting this? Like, how are you perceiving, like, God's children, and, like, how do you reconcile some of these beliefs, right? So
Yeah.
for me, like, that's a big one. Like, how can you have so many pro-choice Catholics, or even really just Christians out there? But that's one for me. Like, I feel convicted, like, that is a problem. And I think that one of the major problems that the world faces, ultimately, like, lust sort of brings us there, and this disconnection from, sex and the reality of it.
You
And just,
mentioned earlier too, like just stuff that starts at a young age, hookup culture and stuff like that,
yeah,
all leads to that mindset of, I think, people not
yeah,
really being solid in their belief of growing up in a different culture necessarily.
yeah, yeah, no, for sure. And so yeah, that's one for me. That's just a weird one. And I would like to talk to, like, somebody from there or whatever, and just, like, have conversations, and try to figure out, like, how did you get there, like, mentally?
Yeah,
Um,
that'd be good. I can't speak to that, but that'd be good if you got someone on who could, for whatever reason, thought that they had a point biblically to make with that. I'd be interested to hear that as well, because
yeah.
I can't draw that conclusion either. But
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't see how, like, anyways, but I don't, I need to check those numbers too, but I thought those numbers were kind of staggering. Not 100% sure on those. I just kind of did a quick search, but I wouldn't really be that surprised if there were that many. Uh,
also not I'm not gonna dive too deep into this, but also I don't necessarily like how the abortion issue is tied to the religious versus the non-religious. I think a
right.
very
Yeah.
sound scientific argument can be made against it.
No, it's more
I
scientific
don't
than
think
it is
I don't think that you
religious.
have to. I don't
Yeah.
think you have to lay on God to make a
No,
conversation
you
against it.
don't,
And I
man.
that and it gets wrapped into that of like,
Yeah.
sorry, I don't care about your book, and it's like I'm not even talking about your book. You know, like we can, but I think there's a very sound, like I said, scientific argument to be made. I don't think that you have to bring up God at all. Which
I You
yeah,
don't, man. It's not your blood, bro. It's somebody else's blood. I mean, it's just that's what it boils down to, right?
yeah. I
Like,
just hate when it gets lumped into that. When it gets
yeah,
simplified as like, oh, it's believers versus non or atheists, and I don't think that
right.
that's true.
That's actually a really good point. And there is a secular pro life movement that's happening. But I think the world sort of, yeah, the world just goes there. Like it's a religious issue, and it really isn't. And
No,
it's like science will tell you the moment of conception is like that is a person, like a person is formed in that moment.
yeah,
That is when life begins, is like at the moment of conception. Unfortunately, like that's just the scientific reality of it. Like that's another human being. That's not like I said, like it's somebody else's blood that is on your hand. And we could have a whole podcast on that, but for me,
and
like that's
I do think the major voices who are having that debate are coming at it from that standpoint. They're not sitting there reading scripture. They're very much talking about the science of it. You know, they're
yeah.
not quoting Isaiah, on why
Yeah,
abortion is wrong,
right. Yeah, and then I mean, we the world is in a bad spot with that. I mean, there's like 70 million abortions every year.
Yeah, it's tough.
So I mean, like you could talk about genocide and all these things, but I mean, that's a big one that is tough for. It's even hard to even talk about, but it is just a reality. And there are bad situations for people, and I mean, we have sympathy for these people that we're in a bad position. I mean, but the reality is like a majority of the abortions just happen because it's an unwanted thing, and that's I mean that's just the reality of it.
Yeah,
And
statistically, it's being used as birth control,
yeah,
not in these dire circumstances that come up all the time. Which I think, if you talk to even a person of faith, would be able to like meet you somewhere with some of those circumstances. But
yeah,
that's not the reality of what's going on. And if you can't address that aspect of it, then it makes it really hard to have the conversation in general.
yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, yeah, we could like you just said, that was perfect. Like as anybody from religion can sympathize with somebody in a bad situation, but that doesn't mean that you just get to now do whatever you want with anything. And like people have like 5 abortions and all this, and they're joking about it.
Yeah,
It's just really it's just gotten to a place where, and it's just it takes the whole concept of sex and family and all these things that are supposed to be good things, and it just waters everything down to the point where it's just a rough thing. But that's one big conviction I have, and I know that you have some other thoughts on other convictions and stuff. But I mean, for me, pro-choice Catholics, it's like, man, I want to call those people out just
yeah.
continually.
Yeah, I mean, mine. I think a major one I have is has to do with that certainly, and it's people's lackadaisical sexual behavior. Like, I don't think sex positiveness leads to good results for men or for women. I don't have
Mhm.
standards for one that I don't have for another. I think ultimately it leads to pretty broken people and pretty unhappy people, and I think hookup culture as a whole, whether you bring abortion or kids into it, is very damaging to both men and women. And it's something I'm against. And like
Yeah,
people can live their lives. I don't think there should be laws in the books about any of this. And I think that's the key distinction here, right? Is like I'm not suggesting we pass laws to prevent people from hooking up. Like that's what you want to do, but I'm also going to voice that I think it's going to ultimately like damage who you are as a person, and you're going to start to devalue yourself eventually. I don't know what that number of people that you have to come into contact with is that's going to do that to you. But eventually, I
yeah,
think that that's going to happen. And like I said, I'd hold that same standard to men. I don't think that loosely sleeping with women throughout your teens and your 20s is a good thing. And ultimately, I don't think you're going to remember it fondly. Like it's kind of romanticized more amongst men, of
yeah, yeah,
having this count of women that you went through in your youth, and I don't think that that's good to promote either. And I think those men are gonna certainly have to deal with that when they get older as well. And if they're not, then they're just like kind of lying to themselves. But
yeah.
um, Yeah, and then but ultimately, like that we were speaking of like personal convictions we have. I think ultimately it's good for people to understand what theirs are. Meaning lay out your beliefs, examine aspects of your life, and then see if those aspects and your behaviors are lining up with what you believe in. And I think you'd be surprised, even the best people out there are going to find things that, okay, I believe this, but my actions daily are not lining up with that. And I think having or laying an importance on conviction allows you to focus on that and allows you to kind of clean up some of those behaviors that don't align with your faith. Um, but I think that comes from, like I said, the conviction of your belief, and you have to believe in it to steer your beliefs, and your actions. And yeah, and same time you have to allow grace, on yourself
Yeah,
and the
right.
others around you. I don't think that tearing yourself down or others around you is a good thing. But yeah,
Yeah.
I do think a constant check of your beliefs and examining the way you treat people and the way you treat yourself and your family and everything, and just doing what you can to, make sure those things align. And I think ultimately that is what conviction is aligning your behaviors with your belief.
Yeah. I mean, just having like a conversation with somebody, right? Like sometimes we are so quick to just avoid and avoid and avoid. And like you don't ever have like somebody's doing something you know is wrong and you just kind of allow it. Like you enable it to the point where you're almost sort of causing the problem yourself. And this could be in anything. This could be at work or in your church or whatever it might be. And if you really feel convicted to do something, like having a conversation about it isn't like a harmful thing.
Yeah, 100%.
It shouldn't be looked down on to like to have these conversations with people and ask them like what if they really truly believe in what they're doing is right, or have they looked at it from a different perspective. I think like we're so quick to like not try to bother somebody, like we don't want to bother them. And if I'm sitting across the table with somebody that believes something different or whatever, but if I believed in like having a conversation might save their soul, like they might be saved from that, then it's actually very damaging to not have that conversation.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's levels to that. Like, I'm not going to be out on the street, like, like bothering people. But if it's somebody that's close to you, especially, and you're just sort of lackadaisical, so lackadaisical to the point where you really kind of are enabling it,
Yeah.
then I think that's where you can have that can be harmful um, for your family or for you or for your friends or whoever it is, your work people. You could be seeing something at work that's happening, like the CEO is sleeping with this HR person, and you're
Yeah.
never it's happening, but you don't want to
Yeah.
say anything about it. And then sure enough, word gets out and they get called at a Coldplay concert, and now your entire
Yeah.
company is falling apart and
Yeah. Wild.
loses like so. I think like like being like going and have a conversation with somebody, if that you see is doing something wrong or has some kind of wacky ideas, like I just think that that's so looked down upon now that it's more important about just leave everybody alone, like let them do them. Um, and it's just very anti evangelical,
When it's anti-community in
Yeah.
general, like I don't just letting everybody do what they want. Like people
Yeah.
need to be checked, and I don't mean that. I don't mean that as from like a Christians need to check
Yeah.
non-Christians. I mean
Right.
humans in general.
Yeah.
And I think it's just as much as you said, like you have to be willing to go out and have a conversations with somebody. You have to be willing to bother them, quote unquote. You also have to allow yourself to be bothered,
Yeah.
and get in that headspace as well. Like you have to be willing to let people come at you the same way. And if both people aren't doing that, then nothing is truly being accomplished. But yeah, I think it's a sense of community, man. I think people when you get into this area where neighbors are scared to talk to neighbors and people who are in the same areas are scared to talk to each other about differences they have, like yeah, that's the fall of society ultimately. Like you have to have these areas where you can trust each other and not believe everything that the other one believes, and have these conversations. Yeah, I don't think that spells anything good if you don't.
Yeah, no, I mean, if reading the scriptures, like Christ is all about confrontation. Like he didn't back down from getting in the like talking to the Pharisees, like challenging them, challenging people's beliefs, like rebuking people to the point where it was just like in your face. And that's like, people really don't, they think Christ was just so nice to the point where he
Yeah.
just let people live their lives. But that's, if you actually read the gospels, like
Yeah.
it's
100%.
like Christ didn't live like that at all.
Yeah.
Like Christ was very much in people's face and very much challenging things and didn't back down. And I think they have this, like, they look at Christ on the cross and they see sort of like a humble figure, but that, like, not fully understanding that is damaging, because he stood up for what he believed in, and ultimately, like, he didn't back down. He didn't like bend the knee and say, you know what, guys, the gig is up. I'm not actually the son of God. You're right. Like, just leave me alone. Like, don't bother me. I won't bother you. Like, no, like, him dying was him, like, correcting these people and getting in their face and telling them, like, what you're doing is wrong. Um,
Well, I
and
think that argument too is 90% used by non-Christians.
oh yeah,
And
no,
like, and to me, it's like it completely ruins their argument, because if you're quoting a book you don't believe in, so
right, yeah,
you
I
you
know,
can't you can't just cherry pick this one aspect, which is not even true, like you said, and then
yeah,
say that, like, well, your God thinks this, and it's like, well, you don't even believe in that book, so what would it matter if he did or he didn't? Like,
yeah,
yeah, you're not, yeah, I don't buy that. Like, you can't just picking out what you think Jesus was and then attributing to people accepting you being, horrible in your life. I don't think that that's
yeah,
appropriate. And I think that that's the most time it's ever used, is that in that context, is with somebody who wants to be left alone for doing malice, and then they act like Jesus would have let them for whatever reason. And I don't think that that's true at all, like you
right.
said.
Yeah, like Christ wouldn't have enabled you to just do whatever you want. Like, he called so many people out that's why they killed him, is because he was, he
Yeah,
was calling
stirring
out
up trouble. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
yeah, he
Causing a ruckus. Like,
right.
yeah, he was wasn't walking through being like, "You're good, you're good, you're
You're
good.
good.
Y'all
Yeah.
are all good over there."
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do you. Like, you're fine.
Right. Yeah, I don't think YOLO was his message, and then they put him on the cross. Yeah. So,
Oh man. No, but that's good, man. It's something that, like, and reading the scriptures will do that. Like, when a lot of people get so far out of it, and that's kind of like what I was saying about growing up as a cradle Catholic. Like, you don't really, like, you get confirmed, but you're so young that you don't really quite register what it is to me, what it means to be a Christian.
right.
And some people, maybe that they do, like, that's maybe they really fully just, by the time they were 19 years old, really understood it. But I think for a lot of us, it's like, man, you really have to get to a point where you can register everything that Christ was telling us and how to live our life. And when you go back, read the scriptures, see how Christ was living, and then you try to embody that, like, it's going to look vastly different than if you were just to kind of go through the motions. Like, a lot of Christians and Catholics and everybody, they just go through the motions. I'm going to go to mass and
Yeah.
say the stuff and get the bread and go home and watch football. And that's, I mean, that is a reality for people, and it is a problem, I think. But
It's kind of how we've I want to say, how it's taught to at the youth level. It makes it hard to get through all the way to your adulthood with those thoughts, because it is kind of baby down. Pete Holmes has a, Pete Holmes, the comedian. He's
no, but
if I showed you his face, you'd probably know, but he's got a great thing on this where he talks about how, like, if you look up like Christian jokes or like Bible jokes and church jokes and most church music, it's all kind of like baby down language and like very. And he's like, what are we saying about this religion that's meant for intellectuals, and like some of the greatest intellectuals in history believed, if everything in our sense of humor and our intellect and our conversations is all like this baby version of reality, you know?
right,
And I
yeah,
think that that's where you lose some kids, is they get older and they're like, well, I'm gonna leave that's child stuff. Like, I'm
yeah,
leaving
yeah,
that
yeah.
child stuff behind. Like, that
Mm,
was meant to make me
yeah,
behave as a child, and now I'm not a child, so therefore I don't need that. Like,
right,
when you seek it as an adult, I think you see that side of it. You see the intellectual side of it. You see the truth in it. You don't.
Yeah.
You're not looking at it as like, oh, this is just something they told me as a kid, so I'd behave. Or I would listen.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so true, man. And it's like for teenagers and like young adults too, it's like if they want to get out in the morning and shout about Jesus and read scripture at school, do that. Like, do it then. Like, seriously. Like, I think we're so worried about like, oh, well, don't do that because it's just not, you're not really like like that's kind of the vibe, right? Like you're doing too much or you're trying too hard, and it's like, man,
yeah,
I see somebody doing that, and especially if they're just like reading scripture or whatever, and I'm like, man, I like the way they're doing it better than the way you're not doing it.
yeah,
So I think there is kind of like a babying of like, don't, if it's going to cause you to be inconvenienced or you're going to have an uncomfortable conversation, then don't do it. It's like, no, like get out. If that's what your calling is, then go live that, like go
yeah,
live that out. And if your calling is not that, but your calling is to go and like correct something that you see happening, like go do it. I don't I feel like there is a kind of a sense of like being so fragile and humble to the point where you're not even, you're just part of the world, and that can be a problem, is that you just kind of float away into
yeah.
the world.
You have to engage with this world we're in, man. And that it involves crossing some lines sometimes, and maybe entering some language that you're not comfortable with, or that you were told to not be comfortable with. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just you have to get through. You have to meet people somewhere. You can't. It can't
Yeah.
be this distance thing. And like I said, like I just thought it was funny the way he brought it up of like, what are we saying about this religion if every joke we can handle, or every word we can handle, or discussion we can handle is all this like baby language. And it's like, that's, I don't think that truly
Yeah.
represents, the religion itself.
No, man, it is more or less like reading the scripture. It's a lot more real than people think, and it's like, there's going to be confrontations that happen, and those confrontations are okay. Like it's okay to have a couple of confrontations with somebody every once in a while. Like having everything be so nice and so um, just mellow. All it does is, and the world isn't that way. Like the world,
Yeah.
they're gonna fight and scream for what they want. Like they're gonna
Yeah.
fight and scream to allow all these things to happen. So we've sort of like thought that Christianity was just let the world do what it's gonna do, and you just be nice and just sit and just watch everything happen. And that's not what Christianity is. And like reading the scriptures, like you can't even almost even get there. Like you could make it halfway through Matthew and be like, wow, this is a completely different thing than I
Yeah.
thought that it was.
Well, that
Uh,
turn the other cheek thing has been, like I said, abused
yeah.
by non-believers to a
Well,
fault.
yeah,
It's
I
like,
mean, and
so what am I supposed to do? Allow myself to be taken out and along with my family and my community and my friends, and keep turning the cheek? Like, yeah,
that's
it's
physical
silly.
violence
It's a
too. And
silly
that
thought.
that has nothing to do with your words and what you believe in. Like, and yeah, you can turn the other cheek, and like in following how Christ lived, but at the same time, like, why did somebody slap you though? And and it's like, well,
Yeah,
because
I just mean as like considering revenge as like I get it,
yeah,
like to not seek revenge. I get it in those terms, but
yeah, they
to
they'll
what you were
take.
talking about, where like you just accept everything, like no matter
Right.
what
You
it
just
is.
you just accept that's you turning the other cheek, is like somebody's telling you like all these crazy things and you just turn away from it.
Yeah,
And no, it's because you confronted them and then they slapped you and you're like, "Okay, now what?
yeah,
Like, are you done?" And that's more or less like what the vibe that I get from turn the other cheek. And it didn't say like, I'm gonna let somebody slaughter my family or something like that. Like that's not what turn the other cheek is. The turn the other cheek is like, it's more about confrontation than I think a lot of people realize. Is it's like getting to that point where somebody might get upset enough, and you're not saying anything wrong because you're speaking objective truth, but they're getting so upset because it's challenging their worldview that they might retaliate with some kind of physical violence. And then you're just standing there like, okay, are you done? Like, um, and that can be a powerful thing, I think, for people is
Yeah.
like the proper interpretation of scripture is a powerful thing. And I mean, if you're not there, then it's okay. But um, you do have to just actually go read it and go and live it out. And that what that looks like is a lot different than, like you're saying, like the baby version of of Christ that a lot of people sort of have in their mind.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, man. I mean, he was. I mean, Christ did. I mean, it's not like he was. I mean, he healed the sick and he did a lot of great things like that were very, on the surface, very peaceful and very. But even he said himself, like, I didn't come for peace right now. Like, y'all are going to be divided. Like, this is going to get so heated that you're going to be turning on each other. And I mean, he was very honest about how that would happen. He's like, I didn't bring peace. I came to bring the sword, actually.
Yeah.
And so very interesting. But do you have anything else on convictions? I think we've hit that enough.
No, that's good. Yeah, we can get into the creationism stuff.
All right. Awesome. So this will be a kind of a funner bit. It's just really just a thought experiment, sort of, in a way. And it's talked a lot about with agnostics and atheists, and it sort of is a major divide amongst um, academics, especially. Like you can't even almost be a creationist and be an academic, which is just interesting. It's also very damaging, I think, to Christianity is how little respect like creationism is given as a legitimate theory for the like origin of the world, even outside of like a Christian framework, even inside, like even just looking at it from the mind of academia, like it's for me a very valid thing. But like as a creationist, like you have two camps, right? You have like young earth creationism, and then you have new earth creationism. New earth is, or sorry, young earth and old earth. But you have young earth creationism, which is, the world is basically like 5,500 years old. And then you have old earth creationism, which is more or less like the world was created by God, but it's probably as old as what science tells us it is. And as a Christian, like we're all like, or for me, like I'm a young earth creationism, like I'm a young earth creationist, right? Like I can totally get behind the fact that, as the creator, God can do whatever he wants to do. And however he wanted to create the world. And if he wanted to create it in 7 literal days, then great. And ultimately, like, we don't really know. Like, how could you possibly know how old the earth is? Like, there's no way to really ever confirm that outside of, there's science obviously behind it, but you ultimately can't make 100% verification like this is how old something is. So really, it's just largely open from a Christian, especially from a Christian perspective. It's largely open to interpretation.
I mean, I think we can define how old the Earth is, but aligning that with Scripture and time as it's meant in Scripture, I think, is nearly impossible. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. And I mean, there's a big like there's just a gap there. Like you have scientists saying the Earth is 4.6 billion years old, and you have young Earth creationists that are saying no, the world is 5,500 years old because they have this literal interpretation of the creation story. And for me, that is actually kind of damaging to like have a more of a firm stance on that and say like I can't like if you can't be a Christian, like to tell somebody you can't be a Christian and think that the world is 4.5 billion years old, like that itself can be kind of damaging if that's what you're sort of throwing out there. That it like in order to be a Christian, in order to subscribe to Christianity, like now you have to throw away all the science that you thought was real, and now you have to believe that and that for me can actually do more damage. Like it can do a lot more damage than people realize. And it's like you see all these things like creation ministries and certain things like that are kind of driving at that like no, it's impossible for the world to be any older than 5,500 years old. um and for me it's just it's so not necessary to think that. And I don't think it's like a lot of people don't think about like, it's probably not something that most people think about, but I think at a very surface level, like where a lot of agnostics and a lot of people kind of come from, it can be this like major gap between the creation story of like how Christians approach it and how like science approaches it, or specifically like how young earth creationists approach it and how science approaches. Like, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's, if anything, it's one of the main criticisms used to knock our belief is the, I guess, drawing a line in the sand between believing in evolution and believing in creation, and not allowing any room for the overlap in those
Yeah.
situations. Um, yeah, like I said, I don't think it's I think I think that's more a marginal thought within our religion than maybe you do. I don't, you may be seeing more of it than I am. I don't encounter too many people who are making the argument that the earth is 4,000 years old.
It's more out there than
I
you
think
would think.
no, and I agree, and I do, but ultimately I think it's a silly thing to be dismissing people over, if you're
Yeah.
buying into what science tells you versus that belief. And
Yeah.
to, I mean, you kind of put me on John Lennox, and I mean, he describes a million ways why there's no reason to think that the text is being literal when it talks about those 7 days.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I mean, we'll get into like a lot of that, but um, one thing that's interesting is like you have so much science that you have to contend with to the point where and it's not just one thing. Like they're not using just like radiometric dating, right? It's
Yeah,
like there's other stuff, man. There's like how fast light can travel and like even like aging moon rocks and doing ice core dating, or what, all these things, right? And you can go
carbon
look
dating, the
into it and
ice ages,
yeah, like if you really
weather.
wanted to go be a
Yeah,
scientist
yeah,
and confirm all this stuff, then you can. Um, but they're not. It's just like there's so much stuff to contend with that to try to tell science they're wrong. It's just a hard thing to do. And then it's weird because they'll start using science where they want to. They're like, oh, well, look at this one thing that says that this dinosaur like walked with humans or whatever. And then it's like, okay, well, what science did you use to do that? And then now you're throwing away all this other science. It's like you're just picking and choosing which science you want to do, and
yeah,
that for me is weird. If you look into like I think it's creation ministries, like I think that's what they do a lot of, is sort of theorizing and like forcing the science to agree that the world is 5,500 years old or
yeah.
whatever it says. And it's just weird. And it's like um, and then people like, I'm like, especially if they deny like dinosaurs and stuff, because there is there. I can
It's just a
remember
test from God, dude. He just threw
having
him in the
like
dirt.
a test from God. Um, but it's like, do you want to go to the museums with me? Like, do you want to go
Yeah.
see them? Like, what? I don't know. And so I have some theories, right? So I have some theories on a 24-hour day, literal, literal interpretation of the Bible.
Okay.
If it really was a 24-hour day in which God created the earth and the world is actually 5,500 years old, what are the possible ways in which this could be the reality? The number one, I guess, the first theory I would have, and this is actually probably the most hilarious one, is the scientists were just terrible. Like they're way way more off mark than they ever thought possible,
Yeah.
and they have no idea of what they're doing. Like they make claims that are so profoundly wrong that it's like it's so it's just that would be so funny to me. I could see like almost almost like a movie being made about that.
Well,
Like
it's like
science.
a version of idiocracy where like even our smartest people are still pretty
Yeah.
dumb. It's like
Yeah. They're just like
even the
so.
most brilliant of people, like they sound way smarter to like a dumb person, but like
Yeah.
even they're really stupid. Yeah.
Yeah. Like lurking behind all this science, like they go home and they're just like doing all this weird stuff or something. Like they really are just a lunatic that's like
Right.
pretending to be a scientist
Just a
and like
sociopath making stuff
yeah,
up. Yeah.
like whatever they're saying about the radio, like they're just making so many errors that
Yeah.
it's like they don't know what they're doing at all.
I like that theory.
Um,
I'm on board with that.
yeah, that's an interesting one. Now the next theory. So that could let's say that's the case. Like let's say
Yeah.
they just we'll call it like science is bad.
Yeah.
Science is bad theory.
Yeah.
Like they really don't know. Like the radiometric dating is so totally off. Like everything is just terrible. So that's a fun one. And then the other theory would be they're lying. So they're just like purposefully lying about it, or there's some like larger conspiracy around it, where they're like no, like they're trying to force the world to believe or trying to get people away from God. Right? It's almost like the devil himself is creating all these lies. That's probably the most unrealistic scenario. I could believe that the science was bad way more than I could believe that there was a conspiracy because I mean you have all these different universities, like they would all have to be in on this conspiracy. And it would just be so ridiculous to the point that like I don't know, it just to say like they just like purposely lying about how old the earth is or any like fossils or hominids or dinosaurs or whatever they might find in the ground, and they find these bones and they're like, oh, these are Neanderthal bones, and it turns out it's just like a chimpanzee or something that like that would have to be one of the only other theories for like a literal 50 5500 years old and what we're being told, right? So that's one theory. Now I have another theory that's a lot more like thought out and more nuanced, and probably some people could maybe get on board with it. But it's kind of something I've thought of, like tried to like wrap my head around, but it's called alternate base reality. And it basically is like the earth appears old, but it really isn't. And so that's kind of, it starts to get into some like theories that have already existed, but you're like, well, that's weird. Like God just like made the world, and when he made it, like he kind of built in all these things that made the world seem old, but really it's only like a day old, right? And I saw something that kind of like led me down this a little further. Um, but somebody made the same point with Adam. So when God made Adam, how old was he? One day, right? He made him. He's just
Yeah, but he made him man,
a
so
man. Yeah.
probably
So
like 24.
yeah. So he
That's my
appears
guess.
old.
He was 24.
Right. Yeah. So he appears old, but he is really just one day.
Yeah.
And it's like when you think about it like that, you're like, I mean, I could sort of see how God could like make the world and make it like appear like it's old and make the universe appear like it's all old and stuff. But really it's just one day. And it's like, why would he do that? It's like, well, we are the center of creation.
Yeah.
So he's not going to just sit around for 400 billion years or just let all this stuff happen, because like he's making the world for us to live in. So he's just making it this way because that's the function of what the earth does. And it sort of needs to appear old. And another reason it would need to appear old is and it sort of has this like built-in age to it, is because it sort of plays into free will, um, because it gives people an alternate sort of way that they can live their life, and they don't have to be tied down to a creator. And what I'm kind of saying is like, if the creator was so apparent, where like there could be no other option, like the scientists look at the world and they're like Like there's really no other way like that we could live here. Like there's no other possible reason we exist other than God made us. Then people would only really follow God out of fear. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like there
100%.
wouldn't really be a choice. Like we wouldn't really have a choice to live in any other reality.
Yeah,
Um, so like for me, like I could see that that God making the world and just making it look old as like a more realistic, probably it's probably the only other realistic solution than science bad and they're lying. Like
yeah,
for me, like I could get behind that a little more than I could that the science is bad. Um, but those three theories are the only really three that I thought. And kind of like expanding on
could explain. It's not necessarily what you think, but would lead you to be a creationist.
like following those three theories, like would they lead me to be a creationist
No, I'm
or
saying like that you would have to believe in one of those to
yeah,
end up
yeah,
with that conclusion.
yeah. Like in order to contend with the science, like that's your answer to science. Like
Yeah,
if you're a creationist and science is telling you one thing, you're either going to say, well, you're bad at what you're doing,
yeah.
you're lying, or you're doing what you think like your reality and what you're measuring about the universe seems correct,
You're dealing with the human
but
mind versus like
yeah,
what God is capable of. Yeah,
right. You're sort of living in a different reality than, or you're sort of observing a different reality than what really was created. And the same case can be made for Adam. Like I'm observing a full grown man who's 1 day old. I mean, that would be the case with Adam. So it's not hard for me to get there, like with that third theory. Um, and I mean, some people I could kind of view God as more of a um as far as creation, like I could put myself in a way that thinks like he could literally like swipe everything like with the flood, right? Like there could maybe not be a trace of a flood because I could see how he could swipe it. Like he could just in more of the way that like the Matrix would work or something like that. If you kind of think more along those lines and how you approach it, like yeah, it doesn't need to necessarily have this like scientific element to it. It's just more or less like God literally controls the conditions because he is the creator. And then that's another thing too for a lot of people. Like you can't be a Christian without being a creationist. And you have to kind of find your creationism first, I think. I mean, maybe you can, but how could God like raise like himself from the dead, raise people from the dead?
wait, hold on.
How could
Let's creationist in what context now are you talking about?
like creation like God is the creator of the universe.
Okay, yeah.
And so if
Not
that
necessarily believing in the 7-day thing and
no,
the
not
age of the earth.
that's separate. Yeah,
Just that
that's
he
separate.
created the universe. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
gotcha.
Just being a creationist, like on its face, like being able to say that God is all powerful, like that's the only solution because how could all these miracles happen? Right.
Yeah,
Like the only possible way, like there is no scientific explanation for a miracle. Like it's only possible through the creator. So you sort of have to like creationism comes with Christianity. You really cannot do both. Like, or you can't do one without the other in a sense. You could be a creationist without Christianity, I guess, but like eventually that would probably lead you to Christianity, or it could lead you to maybe one other religion, Islam or something. But you can't have like Christianity without your creationism.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So I mean I find the third theory like very interesting. I think it's like a road that you could go down on, and you kind of view it as like God's a painter and he's just like painting the world old. Um, but there's some other theories kind of off of that, and I wanted to get into like the more commonly accepted, like more John Lennox line of thinking. And now it doesn't have to be a 24-hour day. Um, because that's going to be it's going to be you're going to like be able to fit that mold a lot easier. And a lot of people view the like creation story that way. Like they don't really view it as a scientific telling of the creation of the world. Like they don't need it to be that. And it doesn't even almost make sense that it would be that. Like you wouldn't really think that God would really go through and explain scientifically like how he created the world to somebody who was literally, I mean, these people were worshiping like golden calves and stuff. Like they weren't
Yeah.
like they were not like the smartest people.
Yeah, we're
So
talking about a society that's
yeah,
coming out of like cave dwellers to like the
right.
first intellectual societies that existed in the world. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Like telling them like keeping it simple in itself is almost like a kind of a answer to that.
well, not
Um,
cave. I'm not saying I misspoke. Not cave dwellers is like 10,000 years ago, at least scientifically speaking. But I just mean savage and harsh lifestyles. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know, not exactly civil. Like, although
They
there
don't
were
they don't have
societies set up
yeah.
and cities set up, like these, we're not talking about overall a civil people. Like,
They didn't have time to sit around and think about the world like that, like we do.
yeah,
Because they're fighting for reason. They're like trying to not be slaves. Like
yeah,
the people, like Moses supposedly wrote the Genesis, right? So I mean, Moses is just doing his best to kind of relay what God wants people to know, and ultimately, I mean, what really like Moses writing the story is great, but Christ really is the answer, and that's why I brought up that verse earlier, is because even Christ said like, look, Moses wrote you this thing. Moses wrote you this thing, but I'm sitting in front of you right now telling you how to live. And so don't worry about Moses right now. Like don't think so much about Moses allowing you to do something. Think about like what I'm like, think practically almost is what he's saying. But like so the next line of thinking would be like a non-literal interpretation, and that's I mean that's where a lot of like Catholics follow, like especially there's even been popes that have said like evolution is more than a theory, and I could get into evolution with people. That's just going to be a whole other thing. I don't believe in man as the what like I don't think evolution didn't bring about man, but evolution could more or less just be like explanation of how traits are passed down. Certain traits can be passed down and they can stick to that species, but I don't ascribe to like macro evolution. And I think evolution is not even the right word for it. I'd almost like to almost find a different word, but we won't really touch on evolution. We're just really talking more or less about um, the creation of the earth specifically. So you have like time manipulation. So time manipulation would be that a day for God is not really like how we view a day. And that makes sense because what is a day? Like a day is a 24-hour rotation of the earth, right? So how could you have a 24-hour rotation of the earth if supposedly maybe you don't have the earth, or you have nothing that the earth is rotating around, to even be able to gauge like how time would even start. So there's like a couple of ways to go off of that. Um, I'll kind of start with like they are 7 days, but what is a day to God is different. And this is actually found in scripture. So you have Moses himself who he only wrote one psalm. He wrote Psalm 90. And he even says in the scripture, 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. I read that psalm and I was like, that would explain a lot, because it's Moses writing it. Moses wrote the creation story. But this is even reaffirmed in Peter, who says the same thing. Do not forget this one thing, dear friends. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years. A 1,000 years are like a day. In the proper context of like those verses is more in line with like patience. But at the same time, it does sort of bring a more clear understanding to, I think, how you would approach the creation story. I mean, it still takes patience to form the world, and so that those days could have been longer periods of time, or what could have been a day to God is not necessarily the same thing as what a day is to us. But now, see, this is the difference. Now we're not in young earth creationism anymore. We're really not, because now we've sort of moved back into the camp of old earth creationism, which is kind of more or less what I find myself like into. Um, and like the earth could be, I mean, it could be like God could do whatever. It could be 5,500 years old. But for me, like scripture, like looking at the scripture, I'm not so sure. There's also another thing where God like stops the sun in Joshua during, during a war. I think it was the Amalekites, but he says, so the sun stood still and the moon stopped until the nation took vengeance upon its enemies. So, and now not written in the book of Jashar. So the sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. Um, Again, we're looking at like time manipulation, manipulation of the planets. I mean, these are all things that are well within the the abilities of the creator. So, I mean, I have a, like another kind of way to think about that is like God takes the earth and he's just speeding it up, almost like the way that the creation would happen is he takes a basketball, like spins it on his finger, and he's just speeding it up because he's trying to get to the point, which is like we are the point. Like he's trying to get to the creation of man, but doing that, it could require certain things to develop. Like he might need plants and all these things to develop over time or whatever it might be. So he's just like more or less condensing billions of years into maybe what could be considered a day or a certain amount of time or whatever other thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's how I align. I mean, I think that our sense of time and his sense of time are so vastly different that God could literally move his finger like this
Mm-hmm.
5 times, and those 5 times in his reality could to amount to the entire existence of the world.
Yeah.
Like it. I don't think that
Right.
I get very confused and hesitant to get involved with breaking down exactly how old the Earth is and
Yeah.
buying that, because I just think we're trying to enter a space of, especially with how complex the universe is and how little we know about what's outside of our own atmosphere. Like we don't know anything, and to sit here and try to act like
Yeah.
compare our calendar to his is crazy to me.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
the whole idea of trying to, like, I think it's fine to think these different things and to, but if I think that to um to Linux's point, I just think it's a very unnecessary thing to get caught up in about
Yeah.
worrying
No,
exactly how old the Earth is and when we were here. And I think it's silly.
yeah, and I think like in a proper like reading the Bible and the proper interpretation, like it will kind of lead you there to where like the last thing on your mind is worrying about how old the Earth is.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, I think that's more like kind of like where I would fall in line, and then so now we'll talk about Linux. And so what Linux says, or what he sort of points out, is that we don't really know when that time period begins, right? If you actually read Genesis, like it's saying that water, which is a material, I like that's a material, and the earth sort of it appears as though it exists before that sequence even begins. And you can't have matter that exists without some time period in which it would exist in. Like, when did the water exist then? Because it
Yeah.
couldn't exist before time. Like, it existed. If water existed, it had to have existed during some time period. So, what time period are you assigning that? And that's very interesting that you sort of think that you have to put a time period on the earth, and then you read Genesis, and you're like, okay, when did the earth get created? And people will have all kind of different answers. They'll say like the third day or the second day or something, and it doesn't specifically say the earth. It says in the beginning when God created the heavens and the earth, the entire heavens and all the earth, and his spirit hovered over the waters. And then the time period starts, and then he creates light. He
Yeah.
doesn't create the earth on the first day. Um, and then there's a separation of land and water and that, and then people will call that the earth. But like reading Genesis, like it's not very clear at all of when exactly the earth was even created. So that's another theory, and that would that would sort of I mean, I would probably fall myself like fall line into that as well. And also come like you can also have time manipulation part be a part of it as well. Like, yeah, the earth existed before the time began, and we also don't know what a day was to God. The day to God could be 1,000 years or whatever is the case. So having now both of those things, like, I mean, that's answering a lot of problems that you think you have, or somebody might think they have, with reconciling the age of the earth. Um, but that was, Lennox's point is, or his take on that is, I think, a very strong one, and I think it's a one that a lot of people, would would find a lot of solace in if they understood that, like, hey, man, it doesn't necessarily really give us a time like that the earth was created,
And he says too, that in the Hebrew text, the Hebrew word for "the" is only used before day 6 and day 7, and
Hmm.
it's not used to describe the other days. And he refers to the common language that we know of like back in my day. It's like that's an infinite amount of time. Like,
Yeah.
if back in my day doesn't mean Tuesday, January 7th, whatever, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
you're
Yeah.
describing an infinite amount of time, just
Yeah.
in a general area. So yeah, I think to sit there and to suggest that, I don't know, these things happen within a sunrise and sunset in our idea of what a day is, I think is a little silly. And I think he kind of does a good job at breaking it down logically and through the text of, like, I don't think the text is suggesting that either. I think that that's something that we as humans are subscribing to the text that doesn't necessarily exist there.
Yep. Oh, that's exactly the point, man. But yeah, that's a
I
really
guess
good.
us trying to wrap our human minds around something that vast and incredible. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
we feel the need as humans to dummy it down into our terminology, when I think that's just a huge mistake and unnecessary, like, to get to the point of our faith.
Yep, it really is unnecessary to try to like reconcile that. Reconcile science with faith. I mean, there's times where like you can, and that's why like as a Christian, I actually find a lot more proof in the science. Like the science is on my side actually. And that's what
Yeah,
a lot of people like they'll sort of come at it. Like if you come at it with science with me, like that I would actually welcome that.
yeah,
Because we'll find a lot of science that will help me like date the Isaiah scrolls and all these things, Eucharistic miracles or whatever other thing, right? That I could like use science and I could take science and apply it, but I can't do like I can't have science when I want science and then try to discredit all the other science. Like for me,
yeah.
that's such a bad move that maybe some Christians would do, but
And
I do
Lennox
also.
mentioned too, like, when the scientists of the time, when science started alluding towards an actual dated beginning of the universe, that they backed away from it because it aligned too much with creationism. Like, the idea of, like, a beginning
Right, a
was
beginning.
automatically conflicting their belief system. So, and that's what their science led them to, you know, to
Right. Well, the first law of thermodynamics, like mass or matter cannot be created, or I don't know if that's the first law. I hope it is because I'm really
it's okay.
really stupid if it's
We're not,
not.
yeah,
But
we're the we're the
one of the
dumb
laws is
scientists. Yeah,
like matter cannot be created or destroyed, right? So that would mean that the earth or that the material in the universe has existed forever at some
yeah,
point. Like, and then how does that work? Like how does a like now you have no time period, like then how do you reconcile the big bang? And was that just ball of mass just sitting there for an eternity before? So there's times where like people like science can have a lot of they can do a lot of damage to themselves sometimes, because they sort of make claims and they make laws that only really have a like supernatural understanding, or outside of like a naturalistic framework, like it makes sense. But when you go back to like having it to be like having it have to be a hardcore science answer, it's like, well, there can't really be an answer. So it is interesting. I think that there's a lot of misconceptions, I think, and I think like as a '90s kids, we kind of go through that. Like we're sitting in science class and they're telling us how old the Earth is and this and that or the other. And then you go to college and you have all these atheist professors and they sort of like
yeah.
they're sort of like pulling you out of the Christian framework, which can be damaging for sure. But I think when you properly understand the creation story, and you understand it as it never was meant to be like a scientific explanation for the earth, and it really truly is more allegorical. And there's all kind of allegory in the Bible. Like there's not everything in the Bible is literal, and it never was. It's never, there are things that are literal, and there are things that happen, and like you have to know how to interpret which is real, like which is something that's meant to be transcribed as like a hard fact, and which is more open to interpretation. Like, God, like Jesus saying, like, cut off your hand if it causes you to sin. Like, that's not really what he's saying right there.
Yeah.
And saying, it took one day to make all the plants on the earth. It's like, that's maybe not necessarily what is really being said right there. So it's really just more of or less like a proper understanding that I think a lot of people would on both sides, like Christians and
Yeah.
agnostics would both benefit, because then you could have a more honest conversation
Yeah.
instead of trying to tell somebody like from an like an agnostic's point, like you can't even understand like how old the earth is. And then the same thing for like a Christian to be like, well, dinosaurs don't even exist. Like they're just made up,
Yeah.
whatever. I think both can be like damaging. Um,
And I think those have been the most, like, to me, the most engaging and intellectual debates are theologists and Christians who reference other sources that align with the Bible as well as the Bible. Like, I think if you're using the Bible as your only source of information to somebody who doesn't believe, you're not going to get very far with them. I think
right. Yeah. Yeah.
you have to find the parallels outside of that, and I think there are plenty. Like you said, like there's tons of stuff that can be backed up outside of that scripture that aligns with that scripture. So I think
Yeah.
there's tons of ways you can prove what's in the Bible without actually using it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, especially in the New Testament, like there's all kind of things that you can find, like secular sources that, like Pontius Pilate is a good example of that. Um the whole entire like finding of the city of Jericho, like that was in the Bible. People saw that in the Bible, and they knew about Pontius Pilate, and they knew about Jericho, but they couldn't really ever find it. But eventually they found it. Like eventually science or archaeologists, sorry, or historians or whoever, like eventually they confirmed that in the Bible. And these are all things outside of religion. We're just solely dealing on the secular side of it. So I think like you'd be surprised on what has been confirmed and like what hasn't. But I think applying any of that to the creation story it's so unnecessary. Like to make your whole life trying to prove the earth is 5,500 years old. I think
Yeah.
that's silly. I think it's damaging. And I think it can kind of do more harm than good. I mean, they're coming at it from a good place, but they're having like scientific discussions that are just so unnecessary in my view. Um, but there are other questions, like why is the universe so big? Like why did the God need to make the universe so big? And that could just be more of like an optics thing. Like if humans could find the wall of the universe, like it might freak them out. Like it might freak us
Yeah.
out to have like a contained
Yeah.
universe.
I
So
think
there's
that's like one of our, like, none of our business things. Like it's
yeah, I know. I mean, for all
like,
we
I
know,
think people are uncomfortable with saying that, and we as, like, not like, I want to say narcissist in our hearts, like we think that we deserve to know the answers, and if we don't know the answers, then you know that's not
yeah,
fair. But I'm okay with not knowing.
yeah, we don't
I
have
don't
to
need to
know
know.
everything. Yes, exactly, man. No,
And I
that's
think Linux hits on that a good bit of, like, like being totally comfortable with saying I don't know, and that's where
Mhm.
most people, like, break down completely, is they can't say I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
you know.
No, I know, and that's a good point. Like we don't truly know.
Not with the overall faith. I think there is a truth in that, and I think there's a truth in Christ. I just mean as far as some of these other debates that are
Yeah.
within the religion and within the overall world and between believers and non-believers or whatever. I think that there's a lot that people can just say, I don't know, and you don't either. Like, and we
Well,
can,
that does kind of bring it home though, because like with the fighting between all the denominations, like even with Protestants, like Baptists are like we're right, and Methodists are like we're right, and everybody's like we're right, and maybe we don't know.
yeah,
Like maybe as like a Catholic or whoever, like maybe we could just say whatever Christ has planned for us in the next life, maybe we truly don't know like how that's represented here. But if we spend so much time focusing on some of these things like how old is the earth or trying to improve that
yeah,
and make that our whole life, or we're trying to prove that our denomination is the correct one and where that's like our sole focus, we miss the lady that was struggling to feed her kids that week. Like we miss like what our actual calling was to do, and that's to take care of each other. Or we miss the opportunity to evangelize someone or whatever other thing. Like what Christ calls us to do is not to bicker about like meaningless things like that.
yeah,
I'm saying meaningless, and it's not meaningless. Like there is some conversation to be had to like, well, are you like is are you doing the right thing like on a how you're approaching congregation? Like is your congregation approaching that the right way? I mean, is your congregation telling people to do sin? Because that's a different conversation. But I'm
yeah,
more or less
sure,
saying like with somebody that's informed and living the word, and their salvation isn't really in question. It's like same thing with like there with a lot of these people that are obsessed with how old the earth is or whatever it is. And my whole point is just like it's unless you really have unless you go back to scripture and read through it, and then you're like trying to at that point try to tell me that the earth is x amount of years old. It's like, okay, I guess we could have that conversation, but again, I don't really need to, because I've already sort of been there, done that on those things.
yeah,
Uh, and it's like it's just meaning it's just wasted energy, I guess, more or less what I'm saying. Like you can do it, but it's not going to change anything. Like it doesn't
yeah,
change God. Like I mean, God is God, and what we're living in right now is nobody's ever, and that's the thing, I guess, with like nobody's ever just gonna like one day wake up and all of a sudden we're all Catholic now or we're all
yeah,
Orthodox. Like, is that really a foreseeable solution in your mind? Is that you just convert all the um,
yeah,
Catholics to Orthodoxy, or all the Orthodoxies, or all the Orthodox to Catholic to Catholicism, or vice versa, or Protestant? It's like, bro, that's not. Just think about how that would look if you
you'll
really
be
did that.
dead. Yeah,
Yeah,
you'll be dead before
you,
you know it. Getting
you
caught up in that.
the toothpaste is out of the tube, as they
Yeah,
say. Like you can't put it back in there once it's out.
yeah,
So I think like kind of focusing or working together. And I'm more of a ecumenist for sure, where I more or less want to work together with Christians and things and like that we can work together on instead of spending so much time fighting. But um, man, that was a really good conversation. I don't know if I have anything else, or do you have anything else?
just one little like
Yeah,
tidbit from listening to Lennox. I thought one line that stood out for me with him is, have you heard the letters in the sand thing with him? Um,
I don't think so.
he just a debate between him and like because he's debated a bunch of agnostics and atheists and just he said like if you were in your hotel room or condo on the beach and you walked down to the beach and you saw like the word Atlas etched out in the sand, like you would attribute that to intelligence, right? Like it didn't
Hmm.
happen by accident. Like the
Right.
odds of that happening by accident are crazy. So you would intelligent design
Yeah.
for lack of a better term. And then meanwhile, like in science, the letters of the genetic code within all of
Mm,
us, we don't attribute to intelligence. And
right.
I thought that
Yeah.
was like a just a kind of a checkmate thing. Like
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, are you sure you believe what you believe? Because I don't, if I don't think you can intelligently say you do. And
No,
I thought that
man,
was
that's
interesting from him.
that's a really good one too, and it's like in the big elements, like you can find God, and even in the very small, like down to the microscope. And it's interesting. There's a really good quote. I don't know who to say it, but it's like science is like a glass of water, and the first sip tastes like atheism, but by the time you drink the whole thing, at the bottom, waiting for you is God.
Yeah,
And that's kind of the case. And like you could, and that's I did like a whole thing with abiogenesis, where it's like you can't even create the conditions that would create life. You can't even almost even conceptualize it. And if you
yeah,
could, you would have didn't done it already. And
yeah,
you don't need these like big mass machines. Just mix some stuff together and make it, if it's so easy, or if you can do it. And I mean,
right.
they can get sort of like one small fraction of a thing figured out, but at the reality is like it's so incredibly complex. The reality of like DNA, and how that could possibly work. Like, how could you have life without DNA, and how could you have DNA without life, and how could the two be intertwined, and how could that survive? And um that
It's either the greatest accident to ever take place, or it's an intellectual creator. And
yeah,
I think it's easier to believe in the second one.
it's just easier to believe in them. Like the most simple explanation is probably the correct one.
Yeah,
And that's what I think like is interesting, because you spend so much of your life, like a lot of scientists do, or whoever, thinking like this one track, and really the reality was this different one. And that's kind of like with my theory with the alternate base reality. But I think I think that's an interesting one too, because it sort of allows people to live. And God is like, Jesus is trying to separate the chaff from the wheat, right? Like he's trying to find out like who's real and who isn't, like who really believes and who really is just, they don't like, they kind of would let any little thing steer them away.
yeah.
And he's trying to find out like who he can take into the next life. And I think it's an interesting concept. Um, but anything else, man?
I mean, that's it. I mean, I think there's a million things we could talk about, and if
Yeah.
I can come on again if you ever want to down the road. But just yeah, thanks for allowing me to be a part of it, and
Yeah.
talking to you, and getting through some of these things. I think it's cool what you're doing, like I've told you, and um, I'll be watching from afar and involved if you ever want me to be involved. So yeah, thanks, man.
Man, I would love to have you on again. I think watching this, I'll probably think of some other subjects that we could cover. But yeah, I want to have a lot more guests on. So if anybody's watching and they want to be on the show, hit me up.
Yeah,
We'll
don't be
definitely have
weird.
you
Come on,
on. Yep. I did find a picture of us. This is a picture I found.
let's
This is the
go.
only picture I could find. I doing this weird nose thing, and then here you are. But that was us on the field. And no, man, just really, it was really cool doing this. And you've always been a really good friend. And we had a lot of moments together. So for it to come full circle and for you to do this with me, I couldn't be more thankful, man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I feel the same way. Grateful for your friendship. Grateful for the relationship we seem to be rebuilding, and yeah, it's awesome. So yeah, let me know anytime, and I'll help you out and be back on.
All right, bro, I'm gonna let you get to your family. So I hope you have a good rest of your night. I'll definitely consider having you on again for sure. So thank you,
Yeah,
and
or
I love
not.
you.
If people decide I suck, I'm out. That's cool too.
No, bro,
I'm
you're
just
awesome,
playing.
man. You're awesome, bro. This went as good as I could ever imagine. So appreciate it. And I love you, and I hope you have a good weekend.
Yeah, love you too, buddy. I'll see you later.
All right, bro.
See you.
Bye.